Shooting another man in the face at the Arbors Apartment complex in Fargo last week made his first court appearance today. Bond was set at $50,000. Police were first called to a parking lot at 2226 6th Avenue for reports of a man who had been shot in the face. When police got there, they found the victim, Zion Brooks, laying on the ground with a gunshot wound to the left side of his face. He was taken to the hospital and later pronounced dead. 20-year-old Amir Logan was arrested in connection to that murder. Newly released court documents say the two men knew each other and were known to have beef. That's the court terminology here. Logan was booked in the Cass County Jail for felony murder, but formal murder charges still have not been filed. He was charged yesterday for 2 counts of unlawful possession of a firearm, which are both Class C felonies, and he appeared in court today for those firearm charges. A $50,000 bail was set. If he posts that or pays $5,000 cash, he may be released from jail. At the hearing, the prosecution said Logan is a danger to the community.
When considering one of the factors, namely the strength of the evidence, there's a recorded call of Mr. Logan admitting to having used a firearm. As to the strength of the evidence, he is a danger to this community, Judge, given his willingness to possess firearms during 2 separate dates.
We'll keep you posted on this story. His next hearing is scheduled for August 14th. That murder still remains under investigation.